Welcome to the 24.18-hour podcast, where better sleep starts with better understanding. Today, we are taking a deep dive into, well, the absolute foundational science of rest.
That's right.
You shared Chapter 2 on normal human sleep with us, and our mission today is pretty simple. We're going to try to create a working template of what normal, healthy sleep looks like in a young adult.
And that template is so important. If you know the basic architecture, you are just instantly better equipped to understand what's going on with your own sleep.
You know, what really shocked me in this material was the idea that I think most of us get sleep completely wrong.
How so?
We think of it as this one quiet, passive state where everything just shuts down. But the sources show that couldn't be further from the truth.
No, absolutely not. Sleep is actually this incredibly intense, complex journey. It's made of two totally distinct physiological states, each with its own job, that alternate on a surprisingly reliable schedule all night long.
And understanding that pattern, knowing when your deep restorative sleep is supposed to happen versus when your vivid dream sleep happens, that feels like the fundamental piece of knowledge you need. It really changes how you look at those hours.
It does. So the big idea we're tracking today is that normal human sleep is basically defined by these two alternating states, NREM and REM. They cycle pretty predictably across the night, and that cycle is powerfully influenced by two things.
Yeah.
How long you were awake, that's the homeostatic system, and the time of day, which is, your circadian rhythm.
Okay, before we get into this cycle itself, we have to nail down some terms. There are 6 core terms here that we absolutely need to define for anyone new to this.
Let's do it. We can start with the two big ones, NREM and REM.
Okay, what's NREM?
So NREM sleep is non-rapid eye movement sleep. You can think of it as the brain's system maintenance mode.
System maintenance.
Yeah, the brain is actively regulating things, and importantly, your body is still movable. This is also where you find the absolute deepest stages of rest.
And the other one, REM sleep, is kind of the opposite experience, right?
It is. REM sleep stands for rapid eye movement. This is more like the brain's reboot and dream sequence. It's defined by brain activity that looks almost exactly like you're awake.
Wow!
But combined with temporary muscle paralysis. And of course, those little episodic bursts of rapid eye movements. It's when we typically dream.
So if the brain patterns are so different, how do researchers actually, measure this stuff?
They use something called an EEG, which is an electroencephalogram. It's really just a measurement of the electrical activity on the surface of your brain, and that gives them what they need to define and score the different stages of sleep.
Okay, so going back to NREM for a second, what about that really deep, heavy, can't wake me up kind of sleep?
That's what we call SWS, or slow wave sleep. Sometimes you'll see it called N3. This is basically NREM stages 3 and 4, and it's defined by these really high-voltage slow waves on the EEG.
And that's the hardest time to wake someone up.
Exactly. It has the highest arousal threshold. That's the clinical term for it.
And you said these two states, NREM and REM, they alternate. What do we call that pattern?
That's the sleep cycle. The NREM-REM cycle. It's that recurring, predictable pattern where your body goes through NREM and then transitions into a little bit of REM. For a healthy adult, one full cycle usually lasts about 90 minutes.
Okay, last one. What about that weird jump or jolt that you sometimes get right as you're drifting off? I think everyone's had that.
Oh yeah, that's called hypnic myoclonia. It's super common. It's just a sudden, brief muscle jerk, and it's often paired with like a visual image of falling or tripping.
And it's nothing to worry about.
No, completely normal. Not considered pathological at all.
Okay, that gives us the vocabulary we need. So let's start with the big picture.
Yeah.
The two distinct states of sleep.
Right. The sources are really clear on this. These two states are as distinct from each other as each one is from being awake. They're just fundamentally different worlds.
So let's start with NREM. What does that look like?
In NREM, your brain activity is what's called synchronous. It's organized, it's regulated. Your muscle tone is low, but again, you can move. And mentally, there's not much going on, maybe just some fragmentary thoughts.
So the shorthand from the source is an actively regulating brain in a movable body. It sounds like the brain is running diagnostics while the body is just resting.
That's a great way to put it. And then the contrast with REM is just, it's striking. In REM sleep, the EEG is activated. It looks fast and chaotic, just like it does when you're wide awake.
But your body is paralyzed.
Exactly. Your muscles are actively inhibited by the brainstem. It's a state called atonia.
Which is an amazing safety feature, right? Otherwise we'd be acting out our dreams.
We would. And speaking of dreams, if you wake someone up during REM, they report having a vivid dream about 80% of the time. So the shorthand for REM is an activated brain in a paralyzed body.
The big takeaway here seems to be that these states do wildly different jobs. So if one gets disturbed, it could cause very specific problems.
Exactly. We've just established that sleep is made of these two radically distinct states, and this connects directly to how we normally fall asleep because that process is strictly tied to the NREM state.
Right. So next, let's cover exactly how the body makes that transition from being awake into NREM sleep. How do we fall asleep?
That's the big question.
Can we actually pinpoint the exact moment it happens?
It's a great question, but the sources say no, not really. Sleep onset is this gradual, subtle process. It's not like flipping a switch. You can actually still feel awake, even when your brain's EEG has already started to change.
But for healthy adults, the entry point itself is predictable.
Oh, absolutely. The normal entry is always through NREM sleep. If an adult jumps straight into REM sleep, that's actually an abnormal sign. It can be a marker for something like narcolepsy.
Okay, so let's focus on that normal, subtle transition. What's the very first sign that we're actually entering sleep?
Well, the most accepted marker is on the EEG. When you're awake and relaxed, you have this clear rhythmic brainwave pattern called alpha activity. As you slip into stage 1 sleep, that clean pattern it breaks down into a low voltage, mixed frequency signal.
And stage 1 is super short, right? Just a few minutes.
Very short. But it immediately leads to this fascinating thing called perceptual disengagement.
Meaning your brain just starts tuning out the world.
Yes, exactly. The sources mention these studies where people are doing simple automatic tasks like tapping switches. They can keep tapping for a few seconds after their EEG shows they've hit stage 1. Their body's on autopilot, but their brain is already checked out.
And that sensory shutdown is serious. I saw that bit about the bright light flash.
Yeah, if a bright light flashes, subjects in stage 1 or 2 sleep they don't see it more than 85% of the time. When they're woken up, they report they never saw a flash at all.
So the takeaway is that falling asleep is this gradual disengagement from the world. You can be functionally asleep before you even consciously realize it.
Right. And it's why you shouldn't rely on your memory for things that happen in those few fuzzy minutes right around bedtime.
So we've covered that healthy sleep starts with this subtle entry into NREM. This connects perfectly because that first step kicks off a really reliable cyclical pattern for the rest of the night. Next up, let's talk about the NREM ascent. From that light stage 1 sleep all the way down to deep sleep.
What happens in those first 80 to 100 minutes of the night?
It seems like the body's main priority is just to get to the deepest stages as fast as possible.
That's it exactly. Stage 1, like we said, is so easy to disrupt. The lowest arousal threshold.
And then stage 2 comes next. That's a bit deeper.
Right. It lasts longer, maybe 10 to 25 minutes in that first cycle. And you can see these specific things on the EEG called sleep spindles and K complexes. This is where you need a more intense sound or touch to wake someone up.
From there, we hit the really heavy stuff, cities 3 and 4, which are now just grouped together as slow wave sleep, or SWS.
Yep. And this is defined by those big, slow brain waves. It's the single hardest time of the night to wake someone up. SWS will last about 20 to 40 minutes in that first cycle.
And after we hit that bottom point, what happens?
Well, there's usually a series of body movements, and the brain ascends back up to a lighter stage of sleep. And then, right around the 80 or 100-minute mark after you first fell asleep, you get your first REM episode.
And that first one is short.
Very short, usually under 10 minutes.
So really, the main point here is that the very beginning of your sleep is laser focused on getting you that deep, restorative SWS as quickly as possible. That's why the first hour or two feels so heavy.
We've just detailed how the night starts with that quick trip into deep SWS. This connects because SWS and REM that alternate all night long, but in very predictable ways, driven by two totally separate timing systems. Next, we'll cover the standard sleep cycle and how those stages are distributed.
So the whole cycle is about 90 to 110 minutes. But does the content of that cycle, the amount of SWS versus REM, change as the night goes on?
It changes dramatically. And this is where the two timing systems are so important. That deep restorative SWS, it is heavily, heavily concentrated in the first third of the night.
Right. That's the homeostatic sleep system. It's like a debt collector, right? The longer you're awake, the bigger your sleep debt, and SWS is the first payment it demands.
Perfect analogy. And as that pressure gets paid off during the night, the amount of SWS drops off a cliff.
And the exact opposite thing happens with REM sleep.
The exact opposite. REM episodes get longer and longer, and they really predominate in the last third of the night. They might be just a few minutes long early on, but they can stretch to 30 or 40 minutes right before you wake up.
And that's driven by the circadian oscillator, your internal clock. It peaks in the morning, which is why you get all that REM sleep then.
Yep. So in a typical 8-hour night, stage 2 sleep is the real workhorse, making up maybe 45–55% of the total time. And REM is about 20–25%.
So the really critical takeaway here is this. If you consistently cut your sleep short, say you only get 5 or 6 hours, you are consistently robbing yourself of REM sleep.
That's right. Because the longest, most important REM periods are backloaded at the end of the night.
We now understand the healthy adult baseline pattern is driven by that combination of sleep pressure and the internal clock. But this pattern isn't static. This connects because the single strongest factor that changes this whole script is just getting older. So next, let's cover how age modifies this sleep pattern.
What are the key differences between, say, infant, teen, and elderly sleep?
The differences are they're profound. Starting right at birth, newborns completely flip the script. They actually enter sleep through REM.
Right, which is called active sleep in infants. Their cycles are shorter too, maybe 50 or 60 minutes, and half of their total sleep is that active REM-like sleep.
And what about the deep SWS?
It's not even really present at birth. It emerges over the first couple of years as the brain develops.
Okay, now let's fast forward to the teenage years. This is where SWS takes a huge hit.
A huge hit. The sources say there's about a 40% decline during the second decade of life, even if the teen is sleeping the same total number of hours.
Which sounds bad, but it's actually a normal part of brain development.
It's a fundamental reorganization. In fact, their SWS can be so intense early in the night that they sometimes just skip their first REM episode entirely.
And then what about in old age, say 60 and up?
Well, SWS becomes quite diminished, especially in men. And sleep in general just gets lighter and more fragmented. You see a lot more brief awakenings during the night.
But REM sleep holds up pretty well.
Surprisingly, yes. The percentage of REM sleep stays pretty stable well into healthy old age.
So the takeaway is that sleep is not one size fits all across a lifetime. You absolutely should expect your sleep to look different from a teenager's or an older relative's. That's totally normal.
We've covered the stages, the cycle, and how age rewrites the rules. This connects because that transition period itself, the act of falling asleep, carries its own cognitive quirks. So next, let's cover amnesia at sleep onset.
Why is it that we forget things that happen right before we fall asleep or right after we wake up?
It's a fascinating thing. The transition from wake to sleep seems to produce an immediate but temporary memory impairment.
The analogy in the source is that sleep closes the gate between short-term and long-term memory.
That's a good way to picture it. The experimental evidence is really clear. In studies, words presented just 0 to 3 minutes before stage 1 sleep started, they were completely gone. The subjects couldn't recall them when woken up 10 minutes later.
But words presented just a little bit earlier, they could remember them.
Exactly. Words presented 4 to 10 minutes before sleep onset were recalled. So the conclusion is, if you stay asleep for about 10 minutes, the memory for those few minutes right before you drifted off is just lost. It never got consolidated.
This explains so many common things, like forgetting a phone call you took in the middle of the night, or not remembering turning off your alarm and going back to sleep.
Right. And it even ties back to that sleep jerk, the hypnic myoclonia. One hypothesis is that the feeling of falling is the imagery component of a dream, a hallucination breaking through before the muscle paralysis is fully locked in.
So you have the dream image without the paralysis, and you jerk in response.
That's the theory.
So the practical takeaway here is just don't have important conversations or try to remember critical information in that fuzzy few minutes right around sleep onset. Your brain is already closing up shop.
Absolutely.
Okay, we've covered the whole template of healthy sleep. But before we recap, let's bust 3 common myths that come up a lot. Myth number 1. When I'm sleeping, my brain ignores all outside sounds.
Yeah, that's a big one. It's not true. Sensory processing definitely continues, just at a lower level. Your brain is still filtering information.
Like the example of hearing your own name.
Exactly. You have a lower arousal threshold for your own name compared to someone else's. That means your brain is still discriminating between what's meaningful and what's not, even while you're asleep.
Okay, myth number 2. The deeper my sleep is, the more I dream.
A classic mix-up of the two states. Dreaming is overwhelmingly associated with REM sleep, the activated brain. The deepest NREM stage is SWS. It's actually associated with very little, if any, mental activity.
So you're least likely to have a vivid dream when you're in your deepest sleep.
That's right.
And finally, myth number 3. If I pull an all-nighter, the next night my body prioritizes getting back all the dream sleep I lost.
Nope. The priority is clear. After sleep loss, The sleep pattern strongly favors SWS recovery. That deep restorative sleep gets first dibs.
So SWS gets priority one night, and then REM sleep might rebound on the second or third night.
Typically, yes. Both states are regulated, but SWS gets to the front of the line.
That brings us to our final review. Here are the 5 core takeaways on the template of normal human sleep.
1. Sleep is made of 2 totally distinct states. NREM, which is an inactive brain in a movable body, and REM, an activated brain in a paralyzed body.
2. A typical adult cycles between NREM and REM about every 90 minutes and always starts the night with NREM sleep.
3. The deepest, most restorative sleep, SWS, is front-loaded. It dominates the first third of the night, driven by that homeostatic sleep pressure.
4. And dream sleep, REM, is backloaded. It dominates the last third of the night, driven by your body's internal circadian clock.
And 5. Amnesia is a normal part of falling asleep. Memory for events that happen just a few minutes before you drift off is often lost if you stay asleep.
So what's the one final thought you want to leave us with?
We talked about how the timing of sleep stages is tied so strongly to that circadian rhythm. Well, what's really fascinating is how easily we can mess that up. If you, say, acutely delay your bedtime until the early morning hours, right when your circadian drive for REM is at its peak, your whole pattern can flip. You might abnormally enter sleep through REM.
The same abnormal pattern you see in narcolepsy.
The very same. It just shows that the time you choose to go to bed is, in some ways, almost as important as the number of hours you log.
Thank you for listening to the 24.1 8-Hour podcast. We hope you sleep well and dream easy.